Welcome into the Go Vols 24/7 podcast. I am Patrick Brown, joined by Ryan Callahan. We are in the visiting coaches booth at Neyland Stadium. Will be our last post-game podcast of the regular season. Sorry we did not have one during the week, Ryan. Holiday travel, getting back from Gainesville, yada, yada, yada. Excuses. We're here to discuss Tennessee's 45-24 loss here tonight to Vanderbilt. I put embarrassing in the headline, and I think that is pretty accurate. Tennessee just outscored 24-3 in the second half. It was a 21-14 game. Defense then gave up 4 touchdowns and a field goal in 5 possessions against Diego Pavia, who had over 400 yards of total offense, 165 rushing yards. And Tennessee ends its regular season at 8-4 with a third home loss of the season, after coming into this season with just 4 home losses under Josh Heupel. So the form here at this stadium, very disappointing. And it's one thing to go toe-to-toe with Georgia and blow that game at the end. It's another thing to, make a bunch of mistakes and lose to Oklahoma, who's going to the playoff. And it's another thing to get humiliated by Vanderbilt. And take nothing away from the Commodores. This has been their best season in program history. But that was really embarrassing. And Josh Heupel was very short in the post-game press conference. He usually is after losses, but he said just really disappointing in the second half. And I think, Ryan, this leaves Tennessee going into the offseason and the start of the offseason with a lot of questions about where this program needs to go, because they aspire to be more than 8-4, and they aspire not to lose by 21 points at home to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, if you would ask a lot of people in April and May, because I heard a lot of this at the time, after Nico Iamaleava left Tennessee, I think a lot of people were not expecting much from this team and said at the time, this team will be doing well to go 8-4 with everything they've dealt with. And at that time, you didn't even know how things were going to go with Boot Carter. You didn't know that Jermod McCoy wasn't going to play a snap this season. You didn't know Ricky Gibson was going to go down the season opener. So on one hand, there are legitimate reasons this team just might not have been as good as they hoped to be. On the other hand, I don't think Tennessee fans will ever view it as acceptable for Tennessee to get run out of the building by Vanderbilt on its home field and to have fans streaming out of here halfway through the fourth quarter because they're losing to Vanderbilt so decisively. And I don't think anybody believes that in year 5 under Josh Heupel, they should have a limited enough roster that even with a few losses, 8-4 is the best you can do. And on top of that, you lost to Georgia in a game that you easily could have won early in the season. And who knows how differently the season goes if that one goes the other way. So a lot of things about this season that won't sit well with people. It was not a disastrous season, but when you look back on it as a whole, I mean, big picture is you beat one team with a winning record this season, and it was East Tennessee State. They didn't really have a landmark win to kind of hang their hat on, and the ranked teams they played, they lost to all of them. They got to win at Florida for the first time in 22 years, so it wasn't a completely uneventful season, but when you look back on it, just not any one single accomplishment that will make this team look special in the grand scheme of things, and that's not where this fan base and not where this program expects to be at this point. And there are legitimate things that people can point to right now that everyone can say have to get better this offseason. So while yeah, I don't think anyone should have any realistic thoughts of, hey, Josh Heupel's not the guy, or hey, they need to make a change this offseason or anything like that. And I don't think many people are saying that tonight. But at the same time, I think there's some real things they need to evaluate, because I think a lot of people are looking at what happened this season, what happened tonight, and now looking down the barrel of a really tough schedule next season and thinking, what does this mean for that schedule next year? And are things going to get better when you play such a tough schedule in this new 16-team SEC and 9-game conference schedule? It's just, where can you get better, and what's the path forward? And does Josh Heupel have some tough decisions to make? I think you've got to evaluate a lot of things coming out of this season now.
Yeah, and we are live on, I believe, our Twitter X account. We're live on our YouTube channel. I believe Ben McKee, our awesome colleague, has posted a thread on the checkerboard at GoVols 24/7. So if you're listening, feel free to leave comments. We already have some rolling in. We'll go ahead and point out that we are running a Black Friday sale right now at GoVols 24/7. It's about to be a busy time of the year, so great time to join. It's our best deal of the year. But to your point, Ryan, I kind of buried the lead there. I mean, Tennessee was 0-4 against ranked teams this year, and they got 3 of those games at home. And you're going to play more of those tough types of games next season, as you mentioned, with the 9-game conference schedule. So for this program, they aspire to be competing for championships. They were far off of it. You're eliminated from college football playoff contention at the beginning of November. with 2 close home losses in a game, games that could have gone either way, I guess, at home, in a game at Alabama where you had a 14-point swing at the end of the first half. But yeah, I mean, they've got to do some things. I think that's pretty clear. And we have some comments here. Matthew Sullivan, status quo is not acceptable. Then it becomes a Heupel thing for fork in the road off season with staffing. I actually agree with that because, and we'd kind of maybe discussed this, not on the podcast, but before, like, when talking about Tennessee being out of playoff contention, how do you finish? Well, if you finish 9-3, you beat Florida and Vanderbilt, you maybe can say, hey, we were just a few plays away from being back in the playoff.
Sure.
Now you're like, okay, 8-4, you're further off than, and maybe this prompts some changes. Certainly, we'll go ahead and get the first fire Tim Banks hashtag of the podcast. That was a clearly a sentiment in our game thread on GoVols 24/7. And so
there's been a lot of that throughout the year, to be honest.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's when you regress that significantly on defense. I mean, they allowed, I think, 16 points per game last season. This year they were up to 28 after this one. I think 345 points in 12 games. I've never been good at math, but I think that's the worst scoring defense since their first season here in 2021, when their roster was far and away not as good as this one. Now, as Heupel mentioned after the game, and he didn't come out and say, yeah, I'm firing people and all that stuff. The game was still pretty fresh, and he said that he will evaluate a lot of things. Starting, he was asked about the defense, what major changes are needed on defense, and certainly they need to make some changes because it wasn't good enough this season. So you have a guy in Tim Banks who was a Broyles Award finalist this time a year ago, one of the top assistant coaches in college football. That defense got Tennessee to the playoff. This defense held Tennessee back because you made steps. You quote unquote fixed the offense. Now the offense didn't play great today.
Yeah.
The offense has had a lot of mistakes this season. They cost them. The offense was a big issue in the Oklahoma game. It had some other games where it was a little sketchy, but you still, the numbers are still pretty good. But the defense, significant regression. You look at this game today, they just had no answers whatsoever relying for Diego Pavia. You had guys out of position, guys out of gaps. You had guys out of, chasing shadows. I mean, when you have, I believe Vanderbilt had 12 plays of 20-plus yards and almost 450 yards on just 19 plays. If you throw in runs of 10-plus yards and passes of 15-plus yards are sort of viewed as explosive plays.
And Diego Pavia himself ran for 160
yards. He
had,
a 31-yard run, a 41-yard run. Cedric Alexander had touchdown runs at 28 and 39 yards. I don't know. They gave up over 300 yards rushing, and that's bad. I mean, you had, it was parting of the Red Sea in some places. So just really, really bad defense. And they've made some strides over the last few weeks, but it proved to be fool's gold. So I think it is, as this comment too, Tennessee was massively out. I'd throw the offense in that too, Ryan, because I think Vanderbilt seemed to be, they had Tennessee off balance, and Tennessee never really got in a rhythm outside of a drive or two. Maybe the first drive, right? They go down the field, 12 plays, 80 yards.
Yeah.
Then they have the long touchdown pass to Brazel, and then Deshaun Bishop gets loose for a 35-yard run, and then they scored 3 points after that. Now, Mike Matthews had a drop touchdown. There were 2 plays in this game that at one point it was 31-24 early in the fourth quarter. There were 2 4-point swings in this game with the Jalen McMurray roughing the passer penalty. That turns a field goal attempt into a touchdown for Vanderbilt just before halftime, and then the Mike Matthews drop touchdown. You score there, it's 31-28. Crowd's back in the game. They said they kicked a field goal and never scored again, so never got stopped again. So you're a couple plays away here, from being in the game later or longer, but defensively you were just so bad tonight that I don't know how you evaluate the season if you're Josh Heupel and determine that there's something that's got to change up there. I think.
Yeah, I think so too. It's whether it's obviously the easy answer is usually fire the coordinator, and look, maybe that is the solution. I'm not saying it's not, but only the coaching staff and the players know what's really gone into some of this, and there may be some things that they can change schematically or change their approach that can make the overall results better without you having to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You might not have to just make wholesale staff changes, and that's the evaluation Josh Heupel gets paid a lot of money to make. It's his job is on the line at the end of the day with all these changes. If you make the wrong call on keeping a coordinator or keeping a position coach, it can ultimately come back to bite you in the long run. So he's got to make the best decision for him and for this program. But that's been the one thing about Josh Heupel that we've still been waiting to see, and I'm surprised we're still asking this question in year 5, honestly. But not really when you look at his track record, and that is is he willing to shake up his staff and get rid of some guys that he's shown a lot of loyalty to do what's necessary in his mind to take this program to another level? And that's even more necessary now, I think, in the 16-team league, where the margin, I mean, Texas A&M goes from an unbeaten season to out of the SEC championship game with one loss. It's the margin is so slim in this league, and every little thing you do can make a difference. And especially in the transfer portal era, the rosters are so comparable now. Some of the top rosters are all, there's not a lot of separation. It comes down to your depth and how well you develop your freshmen throughout the season and so many things. So every little thing matters, and you've got to, be thinking about how to make your staff, how to make your program better in every aspect throughout the calendar year, not just the end of the season all the time. And he's got to assess whether he thinks they're doing that and whether changes need to be made. And I don't know what he'll decide. I don't know if Danny White will get involved in some of this and make his opinion very clear, or force changes. I don't know that you, ideally as an AD, I don't think you ever want to get into forcing changes, but sometimes that happens. And so, they've got some serious self-scouting to do and deciding what the problems are and how to fix them. But Tennessee's got too much talent defensively to be as bad as they were tonight. There's no reason they should be at that point. They did regress on the defensive line. I think had trouble replacing Omari Thomas and Elijah Simmons and Omar Norman-Lott. They never quite replaced those guys. Had a lot of young players. Didn't do anything in the portal really to help them. Josh Shell was the only guy they added there, and he didn't really bring anything that helped them this year. So just not enough there up front, and that had kind of a trickle-down effect. And you had cornerback injuries too that had a big effect on this team. But that doesn't explain everything, and that's where I think they've got to go back and just figure out what went wrong, and maybe multiple fixes need to be made to address what we saw tonight, which was just an ugly defensive showing.
Yeah, and the logistics of the situation are you gave Tim Banks a multi-year big money contract extension in the offseason that he's 1 year into. So if you made a move, it would be expensive, but not insurmountable.
Cheaper than firing a head coach.
True. And I guess there's been some talk about him, I guess, reuniting with James Franklin. I don't know how at Virginia Tech, I don't know how real that is, but that's I guess that's out there. I don't know. We'll see. There could be a lot of movement with all these coaching carousel stuff. These guys are gonna need to fill out their staff, so we'll see. But I think what's interesting to me is officially now Tennessee is sometimes slow on these things, but contract wise, I think 7 of the 10 assistant coaches currently have about 2 months left on their deals.
Yeah.
Now we don't know if stuff's been signed and just not released. We don't know if stuff is just maybe handshake deals and guys are expecting to be back, but 3 of the guys that aren't that are under contract beyond this season are Tim Banks, Willie Martinez, and LaVorn Harbin, who was promoted this offseason to coach the outside linebacker. So that means the entire offensive staff is contractually, their deals run out in January. Again, we'll see what happens there, but that's just the logistics of this situation that I guess people need to be aware of. With the roster defensively, we're not going to get into a huge transfer portal discussion here. But
There's time for that later.
We'll have time for that. But defensively, Tennessee is losing 5 seniors on the defensive line. The bulk of your top snap getters and contributors on the defensive line. The secondary is losing Jalen McMurray, Andre Turntine. I would think those are the 2 positions that Tennessee will need to hit the hardest in the transfer portal. Those will probably be the priorities. That's a conversation that do they need to spend more at safety? Because as we've discussed, if you've mentioned Ryan, that's not a position that they prioritize. They need to go get a big-time defensive tackle in the portal. What happens at linebacker? Obviously, Arion Carter could go pro. They could have some young guys that they may need to try to keep and continue to develop. So it's not just the coaching staff. I think on that side of the football, I think there's personnel things that they need to go through too.
No question, and that's a big part of it. This year's different. You don't have to go straight into roster retention mode, although you do. You have to start those conversations now, but no one can officially enter the portal until January 2nd. So you've got a month or so to figure out a lot of this stuff. Behind the scenes, you will certainly see players begin to announce their intentions to enter the portal here probably tomorrow. We'll see some of that start across the country. It's already started in some places with coaching changes and stuff, but certainly it's possible you could see some Tennessee players announce pretty quickly that they'll be heading to the portal this offseason, and most of those will probably be related to playing time. But there will be some guys that either have some decisions to make based on their situations or want raises, as we see here and everywhere in every offseason now, and especially with revenue sharing available. And it could be a crazier offseason than usual, just to warn people. I mean, it might not be any indictment on Tennessee at all, and there just may be more movement across the country because there is more money being spent now across the country with the addition of revenue sharing. Schools that didn't have money before now have money to spend in some cases, and then you have some programs sort of paid their roster for this season in advance before July 1st when revenue sharing kicked in. So they got more money to spend this offseason in the transfer portal. So it may be a pretty wild offseason. So we'll see, if Tennessee has any unexpected departures. I would almost bet you'll probably see at least one or two. That's kind of the case for most programs across the country. So yeah, you got to figure out who's coming back first and kind of go from there. Last year was a Mike Matthews. This year it could be somebody else that's a first or second year player that you're like, hey, don't want to lose that guy, but sometimes you gotta make some tough decisions and decide, at what price you're willing to keep everybody. And that's the kind of stuff Josh Heupel and his staff get paid the big bucks to figure out, and they've got to certainly put a lot of time and effort into that over the next several weeks.
Yeah. Final note on the defensive roster, obviously Javon McCoy probably turning pro. He didn't get anything from him this year, unfortunately, because of his injury. I got to think Colton Hood's probably right behind him, and so we'll see. Those are the two draft decisions that seem pretty obvious based on where some of those guys are getting projected and some of the feedback.
Hood had probably his worst moment tonight, that ugly angle on a long play, but he's had a really good year. So I would imagine he'll go pro.
And then we'll see what Carter does. And I think middle of the season, seemed like he was almost certainly looking to head to the draft and turn pro. I don't know if his injury impacted anything, but that'll be, again, there's guys that you may want to pay that you may want to keep them out of the draft. I mean, That's what Ohio State did. They had a bunch of seniors that they threw a lot of money at to say, hey, we want you for another year, and it paid off. So, yeah.
Tennessee's got they've got some better, you mentioned Arion Carter. I think on the offensive side, Lance Hurd is another one. Some veterans who have some kind of 50-50 looking decisions to make. Lance Hurd has played a lot better this year than he did last year, but he's not getting a lot of early round draft discussion. So I think he's maybe more open to coming back than you would have thought probably around mid-season. So does he come back? What does Tennessee do there? And there's a lot that goes into that discussion, including whether they want to go ahead and play David Sanders at left tackle, which was obviously something that was discussed in his recruitment. He played right tackle this year. What do they want to do there? What does he want to do? And how does that all sort of fit together if Lance Hurd was wanting to stay or decides to stay? And then, Arion Carter, you got some other young guys that I'm sure Tennessee, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of schools clearly tamper and, send word through the grapevine, hey, if you get in the portal, there's more money for you here, whatever. So you're going to have some things like that to deal with. There will be some fires to put out, but exactly how all that shakes out, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But there will be some important veterans on this team that will have some decisions to make, and certainly Arion Carter and Lance Hurd, I think, are two of them, because those look like toss-ups right now, where they could go pro or they could stay. And then you've also got Joey Aguilar at quarterback that we obviously don't know what's going to happen with that court case, Diego Pavia's lawsuit, trying to essentially get rid of all junior college eligibility rules, where those years don't even count. So that would open up one more year for Pavia, or for Aguilar, not Pavia, but for Aguilar to come back. So you could even potentially get Joey Aguilar back. So a lot of things that got to be decided, and that's certainly one of them. And we don't know how quickly that'll play out in court.
We do have a question here. How many guys will opt out of the bowl game? I think certainly some of the NFL-bound guys might. Anybody that maybe wants to enter the portal, certainly those guys may do that too, so they don't. It would be hard to get picked up by another school if you play in a bowl game and get injured. So
not a huge surprise here, but Joey Aguilar kind of indicated tonight that he sounded like he's planning to play the bowl game. So no surprise expected there. I know some people early in the season kind of joked about George McIntyre playing the bowl game or something like that. So I don't think you'll see that based on what Joey Aguilar said tonight. But we'll have to wait and see what everybody decides to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I said this before, I think the two big changes if I would make if I'm Josh Heupel is I would be looking to freshen things up on the defensive side of the ball at coordinator, and I think you need to do that. I don't know that who that guy is. There's going to be some guys out there that maybe are available, some guys that might not be available. Again, there's going to be so many moving pieces in the next couple of weeks. We still have the coaching carousel to really fire up. Still don't know what Lane Kiffin's going to do. I think that's the first domino, and then coordinators are going to be on the move. Staffs are going to have to be filled out. All these things. So it's that time of the year. There's that on the coaching side of it. There's the roster stuff with free agency in the portal, tampering, all that stuff. My advice this time of year, as always, is consider everything.
Yeah.
Believe nothing. everybody's going to have sources. They're going to, they're going to heard it from this guy, and my friend knows this person, and it's been that time of year for some programs for several weeks now that have maybe already changed coaches. But certainly that'll get fired up here at Tennessee as the offseason sort of gets here. And yes, they have a game left, but it's a bowl game. It's probably not going to change the tenor of the season overall. And Ryan, as we get to maybe the big picture discussion of this season, you kind of touched on the top, like people, at one point earlier this year saying, 8-3, 9-4 would be a good job. I think that's some revisionist history, because I go back to something that Lane Kiffin said a few weeks ago. In this business, you're 1 loss away from being knocked out of the playoff, you're 2 losses away from being in the hot seat, you're 3 losses away from being fired. So, and I wrote this tonight on my instant takeaways that it normally doesn't go well for Tennessee coaches that lose to Vanderbilt. This is obviously, I think one of our comments earlier said this is an inflection point for this program. They need to determine, okay, what moves do we need to make? Because we want to be here. I'm not on the screen. We want to be here. We lost ground from last year, and that's not the direction that you really want to go. So they've got some things to figure out. Again, like I said, I've said this before. Staff change, I would be looking at a new coordinator defensively. And I'm one that's, for the most part, has said that Tim Banks has gotten a bad rap for a lot of his career, but I don't think they did a very good job this season on that side of the football.
You had Greg McElroy and Cole Kubelik saying on the radio this week down in Birmingham that they think Tim Banks is an emotional play caller. And take that for what it's worth. Everybody kind of has their own flavor of play calling. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. That's just an interesting kind of critique of Tim Banks that they had this week, and maybe that shows up, maybe it doesn't in some games.
Well, then you have guys on the sideline that are pretty demonstrative. So it's just what kind of defense do you put on the field speaks more about maybe your demeanor. But any other one I would look at if I'm Josh Heupel, and I think this is I don't know if this is likely, how likely this is, but I would be looking at handing things over to a play caller to handle some game, so he can handle game management stuff a little bit better. Those are the ones I would be looking at. Obviously, roster wise, a lot of those are going to be individual decisions as you sort of see, who wants what, who needs what, who thinks, all that kind of stuff. So, but as the season as a whole, I think the biggest disappointment for Tennessee is that you went into the season with 4 losses in 4 seasons under Josh Heupel. You lost 3 home games this year. You had 4 home losses and really 1 home loss over the last 3 seasons. And you've come in here and let Georgia, again, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt celebrate on your field. Now, as fun as last week was for Tennessee fans and players down in Gainesville, celebrating and when you win a road game in this league it's something you do, right? It's hard to win on the road this league. It's special to have those moments. When this program was lost in the wilderness, I remember walking across the field from section Q or wherever it was, across the field to post game, which is right by where the visiting fans sit, and you almost expected it, right? You're walking past the opposing team celebrating, and the band sitting right there in that corner, and that hadn't happened a whole lot lately under Josh Heupel. And now you lose 3 home games, and it's interesting that this is the first time I think since 2006 they've won 3 SEC road games, and they lose 3 home games. They lose 3 home games. So I think that's the biggest, kind of looking at the big picture, look at the season, right? I think that's the biggest thing for me. And this team was just, they were so inconsistent. And this comment too is something I want to get on here from Terry Pruitt, assumingly not related to Jeremy Pruitt.
I wouldn't think so.
The O-line is a massive disappointment tonight. So the D-line wasn't the only unit that had a stinker. The offensive line, they were so much better to start. They were in the first half of the season. I don't know what happened. I don't know if I don't know.
David Sanders got thrown in there mid-season. I don't think that was the problem, but that did shake up the lineup a little bit. Had some injuries. Jesse Perry was playing through some stuff. Wendell Moy got hurt tonight. So you've been banged up there more down the stretch. But yeah, the offensive line, and that's a little concerning too, because that's not a loaded with seniors offensive line. That's it's a veteran, but in mostly underclassmen and juniors offensive line, and they didn't play that great. And you felt like it was probably the most talented offensive line they've had so far under Josh Heupel. So what does that say about the outlook for next year? You might return all 5 guys if Lance Hurd decides to come back. So it's a good situation on one hand, but on the other hand, you didn't play that well down the stretch. So do you need to get better? And those are sort of some of the cutthroat types of decisions you have to make in this league. Sometimes you got to look at a position and everybody's coming back and you say, I don't care. We've got to get better there. And that's the kind of stuff that I think Josh Heupel's got to take a hard look at across the board now. It's not just coaching staff stuff. It's obviously player personnel and roster decisions. You got to be willing to cut bait with players who are costing you too much money or who would cost too much money to keep, and get rid of any financial inefficiencies you have. And you've got to be willing to bring in the best players you can, no matter what that does to, because I think this staff, for better or worse, has kind of sided with culture over maybe even over slight upgrades in talent in some cases, where they really value continuity and veteran leaders and things like that. And sometimes you might have to make a decision that might be bad for your culture, but might be good for getting the best players possible in the field. And they might have to reassess some of those types of decisions that you make when it comes to putting together your roster.
And another thing too, to that comment there about the offensive line and defensive line, strength and conditioning, is that an area you need to look at? I mean, Kurt Schmidt's been Heupel's guy since day one at UCF. He's another guy that's, I think, gotten 2 years of 1 year extensions.
Yeah.
Tennessee was outplayed at the line of scrimmage for a decent amount of the season. Certainly in their losses, they were. Definitely tonight. And it's hard to win in this league if you are not good there. And then you had guys getting hurt. And now I'm not the type that's going to blame injuries on strength conditioning, because this is a violent sport. A lot of injuries happen, right? Guys, offensive lineman getting his ankle rolled has nothing to do with the strength and conditioning and what you're doing. But
yeah, guy breaking a bone doesn't have to do with
right. But to the point though is I feel like Tennessee has been under Josh Heupel. They've been that more physical. They play with an edge, and I don't know that we've seen that edge consistently this season. And then you have, again, we had a comment earlier about, undisciplined penalties and all that stuff. You had some off-season stuff that maybe threw off your, maybe that spilled over into the season, right?
Like, speaking of which,
Boo.
I think Boo is talent over culture, and that didn't work out either. Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
But to my point, you preached accountability and discipline and all these things from the beginning, and then you have a couple situations this offseason where Nico stuff and the Boo stuff and did that, were the way that the program and the coaches and the leadership in the program handled those situations, that spill over on the field. And basically impossible to quantify that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't dismiss anybody that believe that notion.
Even Josh Heupel probably couldn't answer that question. You have theories on it, but you don't know.
Right. So, but maybe what we saw on the field this season, the inconsistency and the mistake-prone football, maybe some of that stuff spilled over, and maybe you need a little bit more of I don't want to say a drill sergeant. I don't know that we've never talked to Kirk Schmidt. He's completely behind the scenes. Tennessee's run through a handful of strength conditioning coaches, Ryan, in the times that we've covered this program, and some of them have been very much, they'll do interviews and stuff, and he's not. So it's hard to really know if he's that sort of hard ass guy, but I feel like Tennessee was, they've held up pretty well. And even early in the season, they went toe to toe with Georgia, who's one of the most physical teams in the country. Kirby Smart's been bellowing about being physicality here for the last 3 weeks. So about his team. So, that happened earlier in the season. So it's just, and this is kind of how Josh Heupel's going to look at it. I know a lot of fans are pissed off right now, and you should be pissed off because that was embarrassing out there tonight. You have to look at the totality of the season. And so that's what he's got to do moving forward. And as we sort of touched on, there's staff conversations that need to be had, and there's roster conversations that need to be had that you need to figure out, hey, is this a position that we need to invest more in? Is this a guy we need to invest more in? We're talking in the game. It's like Deshaun Bishop, his price keeps going up. Tyre Edmond was making some plays there. He might be one of your cornerstone guys next year. You bring him and Ricky Gibson back if that's your plan. That's things that you need to figure out, though. And it's easy for everyone to say, go do this, go do that, go get a Caleb Downs or whatever. Everybody's got to remember it's not that easy anymore. You got to. There's so much. The price point is so important that Tennessee's got money. They'll spend money. And Danny White, he wants to win football games too. I'm sure he didn't like tonight either, but investment in this program shouldn't be an issue. So
now, to be clear,
you've got to go make the right decisions is what I'm saying. You've got to get the right coaches and the right players in here, whether that's culture, whether that's talent, to go and try to find a way to improve on what this season was.
Yeah, now to that point, I think that this is something that sort of gets lost. I think there was so much out
Started
there.
to rain, Ryan, by the way.
Oh yeah, beautiful night. Just when it rains, it pours, right? So much got out there in the first year of NIL that like Tennessee's ahead, and then I think gave people the impression that Tennessee has clearly more money to spend than everybody else, and it's all changed. All this has changed year to year. The playing field leveled out even when it was still strictly NIL. Well, what's happened now is a lot of that NIL has been brought in-house, and schools are able to pay players directly themselves. You don't have to go through collectives and all that for NIL deals for most of your stuff. So a lot of that's determined by schools now. They hammer out all of that internally. And then you can have some outside deals, but they have to pass, for now at least, some level of scrutiny. What does that look like? It's a moving target for everyone right now. But yeah, so all that to say, Tennessee does not have just loads of money more than anybody else. There are a lot of programs that are very comparable now in terms of money. So to the point I was making earlier, you have to minimize any inefficiencies you have in the way you're spending. If you're Tennessee, you have to figure out ways.
Inefficiency being you paid a lot of money to Jermon McCoy, and Boo Carter, Nikki Gibson, which at the time everybody was saying you can't lose these guys, or you got to reward Gibson and McCoy for how they played. But then you have all that money tied up in guys that didn't make a big difference for you on the field. And, there's a moment tonight where Jalen McMurray gets hurt, and we're like, okay, who's the backup star now that, Boo's off the team?
Yeah.
It's William Wright. He's also the backup quarterback. He's a sixth-year senior walk-on.
Yep.
Now, again, that begs the question, okay, is it because you have all this money tied up and guys aren't playing? Is it because you are unable to get a Timothy Merritt or a Trey Poteet on the field?
Yeah.
Those are the kind of questions that are asked when you're in this situation.
Yeah, and one of those things that I think is a fascinating discussion. If Joey Aguilar is able to come back, you would think he's going to warrant a pretty decent raise because of how well he played this year. Tennessee's got a pretty highly paid quarterback already on the roster, and another one on the way. And Faison Brandon, I don't think those guys are coming in for cheap. And so how much?
No, five-star quarterbacks are not cheap.
Yeah. Right? So how much can you afford to invest in a position like quarterback and not leave yourself shorthanded elsewhere? Those are the kinds of decisions you have to make. And so you've got to, again, just minimize inefficiencies, make sure, you've got to do well in recruiting, evaluating early, getting on guys early to try to save money wherever possible. I mean, there's so many layers to this, and you've just got to be sure that you're spending your money as well as possible because you are managing a salary cap these days. That's essentially what it is. And while there's a lot of truth to the fact that Tennessee should be competing in the NIL era, the problem is half the SEC has similar resources and thinks the same way. And now you see what Vanderbilt's doing. Revenue sharing is helping a program like Vanderbilt too. So you've got everybody's coming in this league. It's a tough league. Even a school like Kentucky can go get a quarterback, a talented quarterback like Cutter Boley, and they're a tough
0 points there, Ryan.
Yeah,
against Louisville.
Well, they can look good on some days, I should say. But yeah, so everyone in this league, there's not an easy out anywhere, and 12 of the 16 teams in the conference in any given year think they should be competing, and so you've got to do everything in your power. It's cutthroat. You've got to be willing to do whatever it takes to win. If there's anything I can say that I've seen in this league that is true, it's you have to be willing to do whatever. And I think that's the big question about Josh Heupel that's still out there. Guys who stick with their friends and guys that they trust to work with and are not willing to get rid of them often go down with the ship. That's not always true, but a lot of times it is. And so you've got to be willing to make some tough decisions that are not necessarily the best for your personal life, but are the best for winning. And that's, again, I'm not to say you should fire a particular person or not, but I just think those are things you've got to honestly assess, and you've got to be willing to take a step back and say, I like this guy, but we got to do something different here.
And Josh Heupel wants to win. He every time they lose, he gets out there, and we're lucky if we can string 6 minutes out of him at the podium. I think his opening statement tonight was 3 sentences, didn't even get to 100 words. And I mean, we as a media group, we try to ask some questions to get some clarity, and it's just we just don't get a lot. So that's just a sign that he probably doesn't like talking to us very much, but he also doesn't like losing. And so, he's going to have to make tough decisions. And I know there's people that say, well, he's never fired anybody, so he's not willing to make changes. He's stubborn. Yes, but I also would point to that offensively, they said, hey, we've been sort of plateauing here for 2 years. We need to change some things. They changed some things and it worked. They fixed the offense again. The offense was contributing to the issues today. The offense was not good enough today, but it's been good enough to win most Saturdays. So we'll have plenty of discussions to move forward. We're going to wrap this up. We both want to get home and stop talking about this because it was pretty dreary. But we'll
got months to break this down.
Yeah, it's going to be a long off season. We'll figure out where Tennessee is going. My off the cuff guess would be probably Jacksonville, I guess, but we'll have to see. How the playoff picture shakes out with the SEC. Alabama is it's getting weird at Jordan-Hare Stadium right now. Second half. So we'll see if Alabama joins the non-playoff SEC teams. Where does that bump Tennessee down? Is Vanderbilt going to get into the playoff? Maybe that I was talking to Ben earlier, and I'm like, the only solace for Tennessee is that Tennessee, Vanderbilt might not get in the playoff. They might be the 10-2 SEC team that's left out, but we'll see. That's I don't think Tennessee fans will get much solace from Vanderbilt not making the playoff, but certainly, and one of my final point too is that some people are saying, oh well, you just look where Tennessee was just a few years ago. True, but like nobody likes getting beat at home by Vanderbilt. No matter what state your program is in, nobody likes losing to Vanderbilt. Nobody likes losing rivalry home games. Nobody likes losing at home. And so, yes, Tennessee, like I said, Tennessee is coming a long way. They gained a lot of ground quickly. And then that last little bit, it's hard, right? Yeah. They got to the 12-team playoff in the first year. Yes, they got blown out by Ohio State, but what you were doing worked to get you to that point. Now you needed to figure out how to get over the hump there. Now you've regressed. You've gone from 10 wins to 8. The schedule's getting hard. Like you talked about, Ryan. It's going to be harder to get to the playoff and win 8, 9, 10 games next season. So you've got to find that last little bit to gain, whether that's staff changes, whether that's how you divvy up, allocate your money in your roster. Kind of what you're saying. It's like an NFL team. But not everybody's got the same salary cap. So it's maybe a little bit more even out with revenue sharing. Yeah. We'll see, but
there's some ways around it, like I said, but it's a little bit harder now. You got to be a little creative or make sure you're doing things by the book, maybe.
Yeah. So, like I said, last Saturday night we were talking about things going great. This week things are terrible. The sun will come up tomorrow. We'll see what happens.
See, I was going to say that's one thing to keep in mind here. Like we're focusing on the negative more so. The flip side of this is how you're going to get better. Tennessee's about to sign a class that has 3 5-stars in it, according to 24/7 Sports. They got a quarterback who's the number 2 overall player in the country. I know everyone will say Nico is number 2 in the country too in his class. Fair, but not all players are the same based on their star rating. So Faison Brandon, I've seen him play in person. He's a dude. He looks like he's got a chance to be really good. Tristan Keys, number 1 wide receiver in the class. I mean, you're getting some elite talent on the way, and Tennessee has steadily gotten better in recruiting. Now, you could certainly argue they need to be a little bit more aggressive in the transfer portal. That's not been their approach, but again, part of that's because they've paid more to retain their players. That's another thing they got to self-assess. Is that the right move? And how much
is it the right move to be a young team, kind of like they were this year?
Yep.
If you're going to bring in this top 10 class, you got to play it early to get your return on investment.
Yep.
You play a team tonight older team,
and one of the older teams in the country, if not the oldest. And there's so many things you have to assess in that. And I just think you've got to be able to. You need to be able to look in the mirror and say, yes, I think every position group on this team is as good as it can possibly be when you're at a place like Tennessee. And if it's not, you need to be figuring out how to get it better, because if you're not, everyone around you in the SEC is, and you're falling behind. So those are the kinds of tough decisions that Josh Heupel gets paid a lot of money for a reason, and he's got to figure all this out and be objective about it and know what's best for the program. But if you're looking for a silver lining to this for fans, this could be a good thing for Tennessee in the long run. I'm not saying you ever want to lose to Vanderbilt at home. You certainly don't want to lose to them like you did tonight. But if Tennessee takes this as the lesson or wake-up call or whatever and uses this and truly looks at what needs to be done going forward and makes the right moves in response to this, it could be better than, say, if you had won, you go 9-3 and you get a win that doesn't even put you in the college football playoff, and you're maybe more likely to stay status quo when changes needed to be made that were sort of hiding some issues under the surface. So this could be a good thing if Tennessee responds the right way.
And we will find out over time if that's going to be the case. This is not going to be an overnight thing. So it's going to be a long, 8 months till next season. Again, there's a bowl game. It's weird, but
spring practice.
Yeah, but nobody's going to be like, oh, everything's fine if they beat a no-name Big Ten team or an ACC team in a bowl game. So We'll leave it there. We'll have plenty of discussion or time to discuss all these things as Tennessee moves into the offseason. We appreciate everyone who was on a live stream, whether on YouTube, Twitter, on our board at GoVols 24/7. Again, we have a 75% off Black Friday sale, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, since it's Saturday. So if you are not a member of the site, go check it out. Signing day, as Ryan talked about, is on Wednesday. Tennessee will be he'll have plenty of coverage on if there's going to be any drama.
Usually official visitors this
right.
weekend.
They've kind of not had a bunch of drama the past few signing days, which is maybe how you like it. But certainly it will still be, even in that case, it's more of a celebration of all the hard work that put in to get a class with Faison, Tristy Keys, Gabrielle Cinda, some other guys that they've got that are going to be joining this program here in a couple months with as early enrollees. So we will leave it there. We appreciate all of you listening, whether you were on the live stream, whether you're listening to this on Sunday on your drive back from Knoxville or your holiday, wherever it was. We hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. We will talk to you guys here in a few days on the Go Vols 24/7 podcast.